Let's go. We see the hype outside. Right from the house.
Hey guys, Golden here, and welcome to the final day of the Fortnite versus Apple trial, day 16. And guys, after 15 days of trial, today the judge finished up with Epic and Apple. And safe to say, today was the most important day of the trial because the judge was bashing Epic and Apple. But by the end, guys, the judge gave us some really good news for Fortnite Mobile. So make sure you guys watch until the very end to make sure you guys get all the news. But either way, you guys know I don't want to waste guys' time, so let's get right on into. So first off, this trial actually started off today with Epic, and they actually started off by explaining how there is no substitute for getting the Fortnite app or other apps on iOS except with the App Store. And the Epic representative actually said the solution would be an alternative App Store or direct side loading allowed on iOS devices. Now basically, Epic's point here is, if you guys didn't know, the only App Store on iOS devices is actually the App Store from Apple. You can't go to like a third-party app store. There's no Epic Game Store. There's no other way to get apps on iOS unless you use the App Store, which is basically Epic's point. Bornstein from Epic then actually explains how loading the same app on Android/console is not a substitute. Now the judge then immediately hops in saying, you seem to ignore the reality that customers choose an ecosystem, right? And she continues this point explaining how Apple created a particular kind of ecosystem that is incredibly attractive to its purchasers. If you buy an Xbox, you know what you're buying into and you chose to make that decision. Now basically, the judge's point is, overall the customers have a choice. If you guys want to buy a freer app store or a free device, you guys can use Android because you can get third-party apps on Android. However, if you guys want more security or privacy and all that, you guys can obviously get an iOS device. So basically, the judge's point is, you guys have a choice. However, the judge explained how Epic solutions would destroy that consumer choice. Now the judge's point here is, overall obviously Apple has built up this super safe ecosystem. However, if Epic obviously got what they wanted with this lawsuit, there would probably be a lot of issues on Apple devices and the choice would get completely ruined between iOS and Android. Now Epic then actually comes back explaining how people aren't aware of what kind of costs they're going to deal with in the App Store when they buy an iOS device. So if you're thinking about buying a $1,000 phone, you're not going to be as interested in the 30% commission within that phone. So basically, Epic's point here is, overall, if you guys buy a phone, obviously you're not going to worry about the cost of like the 30% commission or all that stuff on the App Store. However, if you guys buy an Android, obviously in a lot of apps there is no 30% commission, but customers often don't pay attention to that, so they really don't know, which is basically their point. But the judge then finally attacks Apple and says the 30% number has never changed, and if there was real competition, that number one move. However, it hasn't. Now the point the judge is trying to make here is, if you guys didn't know, basically on Play Store, which is on Android devices, there is a 30% commission, and the same is obviously on Apple devices. However, the point the judge is trying to make here is, if there was competition, wouldn't Apple try to lower their commission to try to get more people moving on to Apple devices from Android devices? But clearly that number hasn't changed, which is basically the judge's point that there is no competition. Now Apple's comeback to this point was them basically explaining how they maintained the same commission over all the years, and yet Apple continued to increase its device qualities. And they continued by explaining how iOS games can now, quote unquote, hold their own with some of the best games on consoles and PCs, and that is quality competition. So Apple's point here is, overall, as you guys know, Apple continues to improve the build quality, the performance, and everything on their phones, which overall creates a much better customer experience. And overall, with many games, they are now able to run with really high quality and really high performance and frames and whatnot because of what Apple has done. However, still, Apple has not changed their commission, which is basically their point. Now the judge then switches the topic, then talking about how there's another lawsuit pending against Apple, saying, quote unquote, Apple's not just being sued by Tim Sweeney and his company, they're being sued by an entire class of developers. Epic then actually explains that there's only one document from an Apple employee asking if they actually need to do something to stay competitive on their prices. So I mean, guys, that was a really solid piece of evidence coming out from Epic. I mean, overall, with only one person ever saying that, they have never had anybody else but one person actually ask if they need to change their prices, which is kind of crazy because clearly they're not focused on competition. Now the judge then actually steps in and saying, but you can't ignore the quality issue, and the judge explains how Sweeney acknowledged that the iPhone supports many more games now than obviously it did 10 years ago. ago. So clearly the judge is somewhat siding with Apple that they do have a right to take somewhat of a commission from the developers. Does that mean they should be taking 30% though? That's a little bit debatable. Bornstein from Epic that actually accuses Apple, saying that they innovate on the iPhone because they want to sell more iPhones to consumers, but they don't innovate on the App Store itself. However, the judge still seems a little skeptical of this and then says growing the iPhone market helps developers. So Epic's claim was overall, although obviously yes they do improve the phones, it's overall for their own benefit. However, the judge seemed like she's understanding that overall, as they do increase their phones and make better phones, there are more customers buying those phones and overall a much larger market for the iOS users and obviously the iOS developers. Now guys, here's where it gets a little bit juicy. The judge then actually explains how there's a chance that Apple might be violating a law in California and may have to change its behavior, but only in California. Now guys, just saying, Apple's headquarters are in California, but I'm not really sure what that would mean. Maybe only people living in California would have to have like Apple devices with more freedom. I'm not really too sure, but hopefully everyone in the world gets freedom on iOS. However, still, the judge is definitely accusing Apple that they might be breaking some sort of law, at least in California. Now, Apple's Veronica Moe then comes up and tries to counter a report the judge actually made last week, where the judge said 39% of developers were dissatisfied with the App Store, which is kind of a crazy amount of developers. Now, Apple's counter is that they created the small business program, which charges developers making less than $1 million a year 15% instead of 30%. But in day 15 of the trial, the judge explained how the small business program was likely introduced because of the legal pressure on Apple. And Apple then actually brought this up and explained how even if the small business program was introduced because of legal pressure, it still supports competition. But the judge then absolutely destroyed Apple's point, saying, does that mean we have to wait for people to sue Apple to get changes? Now, Apple's point was, even if this 50% was introduced because of legal pressure, it still supports competition. However, according to the judge, she was basically explaining how it was. So now everyone has to try to sue Apple to try to get changes made on the App Store. That really just doesn't seem right. Now, the judge then actually asks Epic if they have any specific evidence of anti-competitive effects. Epic then actually cites higher prices and lower innovation, specifically for app distribution and in-app payment options. But anyway, switching the topic, getting into Apple's anti-steering system, which you guys didn't know is basically like a rule that Apple has where developers cannot encourage users to use another payment processor that's not Apple's, not even by putting a link within an app leading to a website. Then the judge immediately steps in and says Apple's hiding of alternative payment options could be anti-competitive. So I mean, guys, again, the judge siding with Epic, explaining how overall Apple systems are slightly anti-competitive. Are they a monopoly or not? Obviously, the judge is gonna have to announce that later on, but clearly she does understand that Apple does have a lot of anti-competitive aspects in their system. Now, Apple then actually says, we believe it's a legitimate business justification to not have links on the apps. But the judge immediately stops her and says, okay, why not just a note saying there are more options online? And Apple says it's like having a sign at Nordstrom's telling people to buy at Macy's. Now, the judge counters back saying if you go to Nordstrom's, you might not see a Macy's sign, but you can see signs saying you can pay through several methods such as Visa, MasterCard, American Express. So what if Apple's payment processing was more like that? Wow, again, the judge siding hard with Epic. I mean, guys, that was a really good analogy coming out from the judge. As you guys know, obviously, if you guys do go to like any store out there, pretty much every store, you can pay with multiple payment options. However, if you go to the App Store, on the other hand, you can only pay with Apple's payment method. That's like going to a store and them only allowing Visa. I mean, guys, that's just not fair. Now, Apple's comeback was kind of not really on the topic, but Apple actually said how Epic never raised a legal claim saying they were harmed by any anti-steering provisions. But again, the judge striking back, explaining how Down Dog, if you guys didn't know, is basically an app whose developer came into the court earlier in the trial, and the judge explains how Down Dog was certainly harmed. Now, if you guys didn't know, the Down Dog app actually got removed from the App Store because they implemented their own steering method to go to an external source to obviously pay and get cheaper prices within their app, which is kind of crazy. So clearly, the judge understands that they were certainly harmed. Now, finally, the judge starts bashing Epic again because, oh my god, they've just been bashing Apple this whole time. But now, the judge explains how, from her understanding, Epic is trying to pay Apple nothing. Now, Borstein from Epic actually does come back and explains how Apple could choose to charge businesses differently. They just can't charge in a way that has these anti-competitive effects. So Epic's point was, clearly Apple could still gather their commissions just in different ways that are not looking like they're a monopoly. Now, the judge then attacks Epic once again, explaining how Epic also sued Google, even though on Google's platform there are many stores. Now, clearly the judge is kind of confused at the fact that obviously Google allows third-party app stores on their devices. However, for whatever reason, Epic is still suing them when they've pretty much done nothing wrong from the looks of it. But Epic then actually responds saying that they are suing Google over separate rules and the cases are different. Now, the judge then goes back to bashing Apple and then actually explains how clearly Android functions and it is still very popular. So, if Epic won, iOS would not be destroyed. Now, again, guys, the judge is just explaining how overall, if Epic wins this case and they get what they want, the App Store will be perfectly fine, and Epic will still have what they want, and Apple will not have a completely destroyed system on the App Store. The iOS device will be perfectly safe, and overall, the point that the judge is trying to make here is clearly Android is still really popular and is perfectly fine with the freedom that is on those devices compared to Apple devices. But guys, here's where the good news comes in. If you guys watched the last video, the judge explained that she was actually going to try to announce the winner by August 13th. And obviously, this got people really upset. I mean, we were knowing that we would probably have to wait months before we knew whether Fortnite Mobile was actually going to be returning now, which really sucked. But guys, today, the judge confirmed the August 13th date was in fact a joke because that was the day Fortnite actually got removed from the App Store, and a funny joke. Gave me a heart attack, but you know, it was funny. Now, if you guys are wondering how long until we actually get a verdict on the situation, the judge actually said she'll do her best to deliver a ruling within weeks, but if not weeks, unfortunately months. But I mean, guys, that is still really good news because compared to having to guaranteed wait a few months, now knowing that we will probably have to wait a few weeks until we actually get a verdict on who won the Fortnite versus Apple trial, that is really good news, and there's a much higher chance that we will actually be getting the game back much sooner than before, which is honestly really nice to hear. So let's go, guys. Fortnite Mobile has a higher chance of returning even sooner, but at least we know it's probably not going to be around August 13th because that would have kind of sucked. But yeah, guys, that's everything you need to know about the final day of the Fortnite versus Apple trial, day 16, fully summarized. And well, guys, it has been a ride to say the least, and I just want to give a massive thank you to all of you guys for supporting my recap videos on this trial and just showing me so much love. Without all of you guys, I would not be making these, so thank you guys so much. But yeah, guys, I listened to nearly 110 hours of trial for you guys, summarizing it into 3 hours total. And honestly, guys, it was well worth it because now in a few years, I'll be graduating Yale with a college tuition for law school. Now, you guys are probably wondering, well, what now? Well, unfortunately, we don't actually know who won just yet, but the verdict will be releasing in the next coming weeks or months, so just stay patient and we will know the winner hopefully soon. But if you guys are wondering who I personally think won, I personally think Epic because they did a really solid job to say the least, so shout out to them, and hopefully we get our game back onto the App Store this summer because I'm super nervous for the next coming months, but also super excited because I just want the game back, man. But definitely drop a comment down below who you guys actually think won this loss because honestly, I really don't know. But either way, guys, I will keep you guys updated whenever the judge does release the verdict. But for now, we're just gonna have to sit back, relax, and wait for Fortnite Mobile to hopefully return.